hello everyone. Welcome to the monthly webinar series from IAP2 USA. That's the International Association for Public Participation in the United States. I'm just going to ask my administrator to send me a chat message to make sure that everyone can hear my audio as we get started here. But it's my privilege to be hosting our webinar today. My name is Larry Schooler, and I'm the president of IAP2 USA, and honored to be serving in that capacity for this year 2013 with a stellar board of directors who is all volunteering their time to advance this important field of ours of public engagement, public participation, community involvement, and the like. We have a special topic today. We're going to be taking a look at ways to engage young adults and youth with examples from across the continent. As you can see on screen, we have folks participating from all the way west in Vancouver and Portland, to all the way east in Cambridge, Massachusetts, to the Middle West in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So we're delighted to have such a diverse group assembled for you today. As you know, these are designed to be fairly interactive, so we will have some introductory remarks from our panelists, but we also will invite questions from you all that we invite you to submit at any time. Just go to the lower right-hand corner of your screen, use the chat window to type in your question. It'll then show up for me, and I will be able to either ask it myself or perhaps even have you ask it directly. So we are a public participation organization. That means the public is going to participate in our webinar series. Let me do a couple of very quick announcements for you, just on behalf of IAP2 USA. The main one is to continue to remind you about our exciting North American Conference. It's going to be taking place September 22nd through the 24th of this year in Salt Lake City, Utah. There's a ton of information available on our website, which is iap2usa.org, but I want to particularly call your attention to our call for proposals, which is now open until just about the end of this month of May. We really would love to hear from you with proposed sessions that you'd like to host. They can certainly be straight presentations, or they could be interactive sessions, but we really are looking for a wide array of different topics to cover, and as you'll see, we've kind of developed a sort of a theme of engaging our growth, our new innovations, and our new members and new practitioners, but also staying true to our roots and understanding how the spectrum and our core values and some of our other key materials continue to be of significance to our field. So we would really love to see your proposals. Please go online again to iap2usa.org, take a look at the conference site and the call for proposals. We also are still accepting sponsorships and, of course, registrations. So even if you just would like to be with us without presenting, we certainly would love to have you. We also have some other monthly activities that I want to make sure you're aware of. Besides our webinars, which are scheduled for the second Tuesday of each month at 11 a.m. Pacific, 12 Mountain, 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern, we also have a relatively new feature called Talk to the Trainer. As many of you know, IAP2 has made its name in significant measure from our training classes, particularly our certificate training. And so what we've done is on the first Friday of every month at 9 a.m. Pacific, 10 Mountain, 11 Central, and noon Eastern, we have what's called Talk to the Trainer, where anyone who is a member of IAP2 USA can become part of a conversation in which they can ask questions of one of our experts. These trainers have been in the field for quite some time. Many of them helped to start IAP2 back in the 80s and 90s and have an immense amount of expertise that they can bring to bear. So it's a great chance for you to get an audience with some experts and mentors to propose ideas, to get feedback on your programming, and so on. So we would encourage you to be part of the next one, which is coming up on Friday, June 7th, again at 9 a.m. Pacific, 10 Mountain, 11 Central, noon Eastern. Again, more information available on the IAP2 USA website. And last but not least, before I introduce our panelists, I do want to extend a huge amount of gratitude to my colleagues in Canada. IAP2 is an organization made up of national affiliates, so there's IAP2 USA, IAP2 Canada, and several others, but we are co-hosting our webinar series this year with Canada, and they have been invaluable allies. They certainly helped Stanley and Susan join us today, but more importantly, it's just great to have colleagues on both sides of the border to be collaborating in this very important work of advancing public participation. So to Anne and Tanis and all of our partners there, thank you all so much. I won't attempt my Canadian accent, but I'll say from Texas, thanks y'all. So without further further ado, I'd like to introduce our esteemed panelists, and what I'll do is introduce them one at a time and have them give their few minutes of opening remarks, and then we'll get into to conversation after that. So let me begin in the Portland, Oregon area with Mark Fernandez. He's had the great opportunity to work with youth for over 15 years. He has a background in clinical psychology, multicultural counseling, and the like. He grew up on the East Coast with a multicultural family and community. He was a coalition organizer and facilitator for Thurston County Study Circles on Race in Olympia, Washington. He's also worked as an educator and reproductive health counselor within the field of adolescent sexuality and teen pregnancy prevention. Has worked for Planned Parenthood, the Children's Aid Society in the South Bronx, and as a street outreach coordinator in Quito, Ecuador. Currently, he is the Youth Development Coordinator for Multnomah County, and he works in partnership with the Multnomah Youth Commission, and he is also a lover of theater, so he uses both theater of the oppressed and playback theater as tools of engagement and empowerment. Mark is married with 2 children, Luca and Johan, who are in the running for coolest American names of the year. So without further ado, from Portland, Oregon, please welcome Mark Fernandez. Mark, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Larry, for inviting me. First of all, good morning to all the folks here on the West Coast, and good afternoon for folks in the Midwest and on the East Coast. It's nice to be here. So let's see. The youth. My job as Youth Development Coordinator is basically to work as a youth engagement expert and youth adult partnership specialist within Multnomah County in the city of Portland. One of my main responsibilities is to staff the Multnomah Youth Commission, and so that's what I'll be talking about today. The Youth Commission is the official youth policy body for the city of Portland and Multnomah County. It is a body of young people. It's 42 youth, ages 13 through 21, that live, work, or go to school within Multnomah County. This group of young people is selected by their peers through a rigorous application and interview process from the current commission. There's a selection committee, and they serve in one-year terms. And every year, folks that fit the qualifications can reapply, or there's new youth from the community that can apply. And the work of the Youth Commission started back in 1996. Multnomah County first started a youth advisory board, or a youth council. It wasn't a commission at that point. It was just a board, and they provided advocacy and input on policies that Multnomah commissioners, the elected officials in Multnomah County, brought to their attention. Well, they evolved. They gained empowerment as a body, and they evolved into a commission system, which instead of just being asked what they thought about issues, they felt it was their responsibility to bring their issues to the table and kind of hold elected officials accountable and start campaigning and doing work on their own behalf. And so through that transition from being a council to a commission, one of the main things that the youth wanted to do is they wanted to develop a Bill of Rights. And so they developed our Bill of Rights, Children Plus Youth, which was the first Bill of Rights to be signed on by city and county municipalities in the nation, in the U.S. And this happened back in 2006. And this document is basically the governing document of where the Youth Commission leads their work from. So they met back in 2005 and 2006 with about 5,000 young people throughout the county, and they did focus groups, community events, they did surveys and summits to gather information from youth around what is it that you feel you need to be healthy, what is it you need to feel that you need to be successful, and what infrastructures need to be in place for all young people and children. And they developed this policy, and it's a wonderful document that we currently use as all of the foundation to the Youth Commission's work. So Organizationally, the Youth Commission is housed inside city government and inside the county government. It is partnered through an intergovernmental agreement. I think everybody can hear me. So I'm looking at faces of Stanley, and I'm thinking that he can't hear, but I think I'm fine. So so this intergovernmental agreement is out of the mayor's office on the city side, and out of my office, which is the Office of Diversity and Equity on the county side, and I'm based out of the chair's office, the Chair Jeff Kogan of Multnomah County. And the commission is made up of 42 youth. All decisions that are made with the Youth Commission are made through the youth themselves. There are 32 voting members and 10 at-large members. They make all organizational decisions and all programmatic decisions about where they go as a commission. So we as adults, our role, so I staff on the county side, and there's a city staff that is an equal FTE for me that staffs on the city side, and we bring in our FTE as well as we bring in programmatic funding. So we each match funding from the city and the county to sustain this program. However, all decisions that are made regarding the bylaws of the program, the infrastructure of the program, the direction of what campaigns the youth work on, what committees they focus on, everything is determined by the youth themselves. And then in terms of our roles, we are basically liaisons between the youth and government and community. So, and we also provide clearly youth development practice, leadership development practice, youth-adult partnerships, skill building and understanding, and all of the logistics that young people need in order to be successful. So everything from providing food, transit, childcare, access to resources, a training, a ride. I give young people rides all over the city. They are, because they are official policy bodies, they are the official policy body, they're engaging with all of our elected officials, both on the county and the city, superintendents, school board members, community leaders in faith-based communities, nonprofit organizations, state electeds that are local in our county and our city, police chiefs. I mean, they're really engaging with anybody who's doing policy work in Multnomah County or the city of Portland. They are directly engaging with and providing partnership with in any way. So currently there are 3 committees within the Multnomah Youth Commission. There is the Sustainability Committee, and that committee is specifically focused on looking at transit equity, transit justice, and environmental justice within our community. One of the main policy areas that they've had a huge impact on is they developed something called the Youth Pass. And the Youth Pass is a free transit pass for 14,000 Portland Public School high school students. And they are right now working to expand that pass to the other 5 largest school districts within Multnomah County. And they're working in partnership with our major environmental justice organization called OPAL, which is here in Portland. And they work in partnership with the mayor's office, the Portland Public School District, and TriMet, which is our local transit authority. And they've been working on that project now for about 6 years, and that specific committee was directly created because youth from the implementation of the Bill of Rights stated that it was a priority area for transit and access to transit to be looked at. And so that's why the Youth Commission developed that committee based on the voices of community youth. Second, we have the Education and Youth Voice Committee, and that committee is specifically in partnership with our Sun Schools, which is a community school structure within Portland and Multnomah County, and with Portland State University. and they are working in the Cradle to Career Collaborative. So Multnomah County and Portland put together this Cradle to Career Collaborative, which is basically a pipeline that says we need to ensure that there are the infrastructures and programs in place from cradle all the way through career for young people. Because what we were seeing is a disproportionate, a clear disproportionality between graduation rates and access to resources with our communities of color and low-income communities here in Multnomah County. Backing it up, the Youth Commission is 42 youth. It's 77% youth of color. It represents 22 different schools and communities throughout Multnomah County. We have young people that
Mark, excuse me for interrupting, but if it's okay, if it's okay, we'd love to maybe have you kind of tell us real quickly about that third committee, and we can always circle back to hear more about this work, but we've got so many panelists, I just need...
What's my time left?
We're really right about at it, so if you don't mind just giving us a quick summary of the third committee, that'd be great.
Okay, so our last, sorry about that. Our last committee is the Youth Against Violence Committee, and it is specifically doing work around 7 forms of violence within Multnomah County along with restorative justice. And it started in 2011 with an increase of anti-gay and gender violence and gang violence that was taking place in Portland and Multnomah County. And the Youth Commission came together and designed this new committee 2 years ago based on the need. Since then, we've received $100,000. The Youth Commission wrote a $100,000 grant to the State Farm Advisory Board, so it's a national grant that they received. They've just written their second $100,000 grant, and they do youth development work specifically around youth against violence in the community. And their partners are all kinds of community leaders and elected officials. And it's probably one of the biggest policy campaigns that they're running now and having a huge impact on how community is shaping their vision of youth violence prevention currently. So that's in a nutshell, and I can take questions later if time.
Hey, Mark, it's amazing to hear what's going on in Portland. I hated to need to cut you off there, but I'm sure I'm speaking for other participants when I say that it's inspiring, all the work that's happening there, and we look forward to talking more about it. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Let me turn to Stanley King and Susan Chung in Vancouver. They've worked together since 1994 as co-design facilitators and artists at public workshops. They received a foundation bursary, I may have to have that explained to me, from the Royal Architecture Institute of Canada to develop teaching material for sustainable design. They're co-authors of the Youth Manual for Sustainable Design. They're currently collaborating on training youth artists to facilitate design dialogue with youth. Susan is a science teacher at Prince of Wales Secondary School in Vancouver and director of youth programs there. Is very active in coordinating school programs for the conservation of natural habitats, also an intergenerational mentorship project for senior and junior students. And Stanley King is a retired architect and educator who's been working in this youth engagement field since the late 1960s, has written co-designed school manuals, and has produced a film of his workshops with youth for the design of a public square in Vancouver, which is still being screened. So Stanley and Susan, great to have you. Welcome. Fortunately, we cannot hear you at all, Stanley. I think you may be muted or something. We're still not hearing any audio. I'm sorry. We can't hear.
I unmuted it.
Okay, very good.
No. Yeah, thanks for inviting us. We're very pleased to be part of this discussion. Our presentation will show us what we are doing rather than going much into philosophy. And then just as Mark did in his splendid account of what you're doing in Portland, Oregon. And then afterwards we can enlarge on the philosophy of why we do things when it comes to questions.
I'm just going to turn off the webcam right now and share my screen. So if you can enable the screen sharing, then that would be great. Okay. Share my screen. All right, can everyone still hear me? Can everybody still hear me?
We can still.
All right. So our work involves engaging youth in the design of their communities. We believe that environmental education starts with having them have some control over what they are doing.
When I first started talking with youth about the city, they were quite distressed about the city. They regarded it as an approaching ogre. We came across a phenomena which is probably common right across everywhere, that children play on the edge of suburbia, and then the bulldozers come and destroy their playground, and they want to know what the rules are. And then when they find that the society favors the bulldozer, then you've got alienation 101 setting up. So I became concerned about this, entered schools right across Canada, found consistently that youth regarded the city as approaching ogre, and they always wanted they would prefer to be in nature rather than in the city. That gave Susan an entry into the work.
And Stanley developed the co-design process 40 years ago, and it is still in use in over 300 communities to engage citizens and particularly youth in the design of their communities. Our program starts with an activity called the City on the Wall. So we have a blank sheet of paper that's up on a wall, and we ask them, imagine you were here when the land was new. What would you see here? What would you hear? What would you smell? What would you be doing here? So they paint a picture of the wilderness. Because here in Vancouver, British Columbia, we still have some access to the wilderness. So there's trees and eagles and otters and seals and killer whales. And then I say, well, you like it here, so you build a little cabin. And we invite one of them or two of them to come and build their cabin. So they come up and they start building their cabin, and soon they make a store and a school and a factory, and then pretty soon they all come up and they start building their city.
One of the things that we need to emphasize to them is that this ogre is not built by a distant they, it's we that does it. And so they thoroughly enjoy this creation of this urban scene. And so then we ask them to sit down and take a look at it, and we ask them the question.
And we ask them, what would you see or hear or smell now that you are here in the city? And is it the same thing that you hear, see, and smell when it was the wilderness? And we ask them a key question, which is, would you like to live here? And they usually say no. Sometimes they say they do want to live here because the city has a lot of amenities. But most of the time, the city which they have just helped to create, they learn that they've created urban sprawl, and they don't want to live here. And we reveal to them that by 2050, there will be 6 or 7 billion people in cities. And that's the population of the Earth now. And if they were all in cities, just like the one that they live now, they would need about 4 Earths to have that city. So obviously, this is an entry point into creating something different and to respond to this ecological crisis with design, with creativity. And so we ask them a question. We have them meet a wilderness chicken city dude, and we say, well, this represents 2 opposite ends. On one end, you have this bustling city like New York, and on the other end, you have maybe a very rural wilderness community like Banfield, BC, which is very, very wild on the west coast of British Columbia. And we ask them, well, where would you like to be in this continuum? And they tell us children usually want to be nearer to the wilderness than to the city, but they still like the urban amenities. And the interesting thing is we just went through an exercise called the City on the Wall, in which they pour out all of their preconceptions of what a city is. And then we to the idea that we must redesign our living space. And we go back to very fundamental questions. And instead of asking, what would you like to see here in the wilderness, we ask a different question. And these are questions that you could ask any organism on Earth. These are questions like, what would you like to do during the day? And how do you want to intersect with your environment? Now this question of what would you like to do during the day, imagine that your space is exactly the way you want it to be. What would you like to do at 6 a.m. in the morning? What would you like to do at 9:30? What would you like to do at 3? What would you like to do at 6 p.m. and through the night? And then we ask them, what would you like to hear in your new environment? What would you like to see? How would you like to move around? And how close are people around you? And these get back to 4 fundamental questions, and this pretty much sums up our program. We take them on a site walk and say, how would you like to experience this site with your senses? What would you be doing? What are your interactions with other people? And then when all that data gets down, they vote for the consensus. And we usually have this data in form of a graffiti wall. This would be an example of a day in the life. It could be done with Post-it notes. They write down all of their activities. When they conduct the site walk, they spend a couple of hours on site and they answer the perception questions. This is an example of children designing their school garden, and here they are with their site walk. And then we ask them an even simpler question after that. We have them draw what they are doing in their new surroundings. And here are some kids drawing what they want to see in their environment. So we work with Evergreen Learning Grounds, which is a Canadian organization which does school ground greening. And this is a project where we worked with inner city youth to design their urban gardens. So for teenagers, we assist them with facilitator artists. We all have experience in co-design facilitation, so we draw some of their perceptions.
One of there you see in this photograph now that the drawing focuses their attention, as you can see. And some of them say afterwards, or we have had participants say, I know what I think when I see what I say. It clarifies their thinking. And then it means that they have stated what they want, and they don't need to go over it again and rephrase it semantically differently. And then they can communicate their ideas quickly to others. They love doing it. Here is, of course, we always have to have food, and here is they're celebrating having completed their drawing.
So you can see that the facilitator will draw for them. It's not exactly graphic facilitation. It's a different process, but we've been training youth to be drawing for other youth, and in the end, you get a series of drawings. Here's another implementation at Bamfield Marine Sciences Center where we had the youth reflect on the wilderness and urban settings, and prior to designing what we call the sweet spot between the wilderness and the city. And the usefulness of this kind of program, the youth feel a lot of ownership for the drawings that they create, and the drawings can be easily sent around to municipalities, to different government officials, and they communicate the ideas very, very clearly. So as an example, here in 1972 there was this big gigantic parking lot, and the city was going to put a huge high-rise on it. And Stanley was working with some youth to do a site walk on this parking lot. Here are the young people. They're now in maybe their late 50s. And this is what they drew. They wanted to see landscaping right in the middle of a big bustling city. They wanted to see water features. In 1972, they said, no cars. And here's Stanley doing the city on the wall with them. And they wanted to see a dome with a skating rink underneath. And if you went to the Olympics, the Winter Olympics, when Vancouver hosted them, you would have seen that dome with the skating rink. And they wanted outdoor eating. And back in 1972, in Canada at least, there were no outdoor cafes. Here's the same parking lot. And Arthur Erickson, a Canadian architect, designed the first roof garden that lasted 3 blocks. And that was how he responded to what the citizens wanted. So sometimes you get very prescient ideas by using this method. Remember, the questions are extremely simple. If I can scroll back to the questions here, and you can see the questions are, number 1, we go to the environment. We ask them, how do you wish to experience it? What will you be doing? And then we draw their web of interactions in in a perspective drawing, drawn at eye level. And the ending part, which we haven't really shared yet, is we vote for consensus. And that way, it's a democratic process. And then the drawings that are voted for can then be shared with authorities, with designers, who can then respond to the citizen needs.
So in summary,
Susan, yeah, if you don't mind, thanks.
Sorry? Say again? Can you repeat that?
Oh, I was just gonna ask if you all don't mind, just wrapping up for right now, and we'll certainly get questions, I know, but if you could.
Yeah. In summary, we give youth a positive approach to the approaching ogre of the expanding city. We give them a means of communicating with the designers, and as you saw in the case of Arthur Erickson, the designers love it. When youth are involved in the design is safe. It's a safe place for youth. It's a safe place for us all, and it has lots of things you can do because youth are very active, and it has a whimsy about it. So they offer the designer some creative ideas.
So just to end off here, I have some Facebook photos. You can find this from the Vancouver's. Oh.
I'm sorry, I had. There you go.
Hello. All right.
Yes, you're fine.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we.
Okay. All right. So on my screen here, you can see the VSB Sustainability Conference. This was organized by youth for about 400 students across the Vancouver School Board, and school trustees were there, and the youth drew their ideas that they wanted to see. So you can go on that Facebook page by looking up the VSB Sustainability Conference. Okay.
Thank you, Larry.
Susan and Stanley, that was terrific. I have to comment on the here at IP2 we certainly strive to be fully inclusive, and the fact that you were serving vegan oatmeal craisin cookies, I think certainly certainly would appeal to a certain segment of our population's tastes. And then I saw you had double chocolate chip also, so I think between the two, everyone would be taken care of.
Right on.
Well, thank you. And Susan, if you wouldn't mind, perhaps maybe you could, I know some folks can see that on the screen, but it might be good if you could type that link to the Facebook site for VSB into the chat window, and we can, that way if someone wanted to pull it up later, they'd be able to do so. So we'd really appreciate that. I'm now going to switch the screen back to Connie, who's helping us host the webinar. And hopefully Connie can pull up her screen here in just a second. But as she does that, as we kind of transition, I'm going to go from literally one coast of the continent to the other to introduce Nancy Tauber. She started her career teaching middle school social studies for the Newton Public Schools in Newton, Massachusetts. After her youngest son was born, she started working part-time on various projects in the education field and served 2 terms on the Cambridge, Mass. School Committee. She's currently the Executive Director of the Cambridge Kids Council, officially known as the Coordinating Council for Children, Youth, and Families. The council is chaired by the mayor, and its members include residents, elected officials, city department heads, community and nonprofit leaders, business, early childhood, philanthropic, university, and youth representatives, and they are dedicated to developing policy and program recommendations aimed at improving the quality of life for children, youth, and families in the city of Cambridge, Massachusetts. And for those who are not in the United States, that's a city very distinct from, but located very close to Boston, Massachusetts. So, without any further ado, Nancy, welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me, and good morning to those of you who are still in the morning hours, and good afternoon to those of you who have reached the afternoon. I really enjoyed hearing from the other panelists. So the Cambridge Kids Council started in 1991, and the City Council felt that there was a need to be proactive in supporting our children, youth, and their families. And so when the council began, there were 3 youth voting members on the council, but there was not a youth involvement. There was no, that was the only youth involvement. And as they continued their work, wait, hold on. I just have to turn down the computer. Hold on. Sorry, hold on a second. Sorry. So at that point, there were three.
And Nancy, if you can speak a little bit louder, that might be helpful.
Oh, okay. Okay. So so as I said, when the Kids Council first began in 1991, there were 3 youth voting members. So they're high school students from the ages of 14 to 18, and as was stated in the beginning, there are about 25 members on the Kids Council, and the mayor chairs the council, and there are some other elected officials and city leaders as well as community members. So the goal of the council is to recommend policy and program for our children and youth. One of the first initiatives was to create a center for families so that it was geared toward families of younger children, and there would be workshops and playgroups and supports for families. Another initiative had to do with creating more out-of-school time programming in Cambridge, as well as a literacy initiative, and also an inclusion initiative, which is for all the city's after-school programs. Those with special needs would get the services that they needed so that they could participate in our city programs, the after-school programs, and the preschools. So about 10 years ago, the council decided that if they were truly a council about children and youth, that there should be more of a voice from the young people. So they created a youth involvement subcommittee and hired a part-time coordinator. And then they were also going to hire high school students, ages 14 to 18, to be a part of the this youth involvement subcommittee. And the way that it's structured is that there's the coordinator, and then there are 2 co-chairs who are high school students, and together the coordinator, the co-chairs, and me, the executive director, each year collect applications from high school students to join this committee. And we, after reviewing the applications, we're able to take on a total of 16 high school students onto this council. And once the group starts the year, we look at issues that the Kids Council is working on, and then we look at issues that the youth would like to work on and try to have some connection between the 2 groups. So this year, the Kids Council is working on family engagement and looking at it from the perspective of not just the schools, but also the health department, the police department, the library, and human services. And the youth decided that they wanted to focus their energy on looking at middle school students and helping them with their transition to high school. And that was their interpretation of family engagement. So they started their project in October, and they then were able to reach out to the middle schools that are in Cambridge and also the out-of-school time programs. And we're fortunate in Cambridge because right now there's a middle school network of after-school providers that meet monthly and come together to share ideas and try to work on best practices and coordinate their efforts throughout the city. So there was a place for the youth to go to try to reach out to these after-school programs. So after reaching out to the schools and the after-school programs, the youth were asked to come to these various programs that had middle school students and do workshops for them to help them to get them ready for high school. And it's interesting because as the years gone on, they're getting more and more requests to do their workshops. And when they decided to do the workshop, they figured that they didn't want to just go into an after-school program or school and do a one-shot deal. They wanted to establish a relationship with the middle school students. So they developed a series of 3 workshops, and they've gone to numerous after-school programs throughout the city. And I would have to say they've had a harder time for the in-school time because, of course, they're in school at the same time that the middle school students are in school. But for the schools, they've been able to reach out to the parents, and they're going to different events where parents are going to be there, and then answer questions and tell them about the high school and give them advice for the high school. So that's been a big piece of their work this year. And also, one of the members of the Kids Council is the director of the Harvard Family Research Project, and she has been interviewing the Youth Involvement Subcommittee youth about family engagement and what it is and why it's important, and asking them for their recommendations to give parents when it comes to family engagement. So now they've taken that information and they've created a presentation that they're sharing with the Kids Council. They're also going to be sharing it with the Cambridge School Committee, which is our school board. The high school is really interested in family engagement and trying to get more families to be involved. And so the Youth Involvement Subcommittee is going next, I think in 2 weeks, they're actually going to be presenting to the school council at the high school to give their presentation. So they're really trying to hit the middle school students, the parents, and now they're focusing on the policymakers. And as the year comes to an end, the school year for this group, they're talking about how they could take it to the next level, and then maybe next year addressing issues of the achievement gap. So that's the work for this year. And the city of Cambridge is very generous because they also pay these young people $10 an hour with a maximum of $700, and they also provide them with a trip to Washington, D.C. For the National League of Cities, where they participate as youth delegates. And just to wrap it up, I would say that my experience as an elected official in Cambridge, I find that while I served, my colleagues and I definitely were strongly influenced by the words of young people. So I encourage everybody to continue this work because I think that they really do have a lot to add and can make the changes that we need. So,
Nancy, thank you so much. It's just amazing. It's just amazing how many different angles you can approach this important work of youth engagement. I mean, here we have an effort aimed at middle school students. We've got drawings for middle and high school students, and the Youth Council in Multnomah. I mean, there's just so many different ways to get this key part of our population engaged. So thank you very much for that. And we'll, I'm sure, have some questions for you here in just a minute.
Great.
So let me turn then, last but certainly not least, to Grand Rapids, Michigan. And we have two colleagues there, Lynn Heemstra and Shannon Harris. Lynn is the Executive Director of Our Community's Children, which is a public-private partnership for the City of Grand Rapids and the Grand Rapids Public Schools. She works for the Mayor, the City Manager, and the Public School Superintendent on public policy and partnerships to ensure the well-being of children, youth, and families in the city. Her office manages youth leadership programs and facilitates community partnerships for youth master planning, after-school programs, and youth employment. And Shannon is, for the past 10 years, been the program coordinator for our community's children. She's also an accomplished dancer and choreographer. I didn't mean to laugh. I just am not an accomplished dancer, so it's great to meet someone who is. She's created dance productions for high school dance troupes and international trade shows, and has also done a great bit of work in journalism and in youth program curriculum development. So, Lynn and Shannon, welcome. Great to have you. And I'm getting a lot of feedback there, but we'd love to hear from you. Thanks.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. And hello to everybody there. Our community's children, as was said, is dedicated to improving the quality of life for children in the city of Grand Rapids. And one of the ways we do that is to ensure that youth are seen and heard at City Hall and in the community. So we value the active participation and voices of youth in all of our work. If you want some information and certainly the PowerPoint that we've put together for today, you can go to www.grchildren.us. It's under publications and it's under Youth Engagement Seminar if you are interested in the PowerPoint. But I am going to turn this over to Shannon because she has been the coordinator for all our youth programs, specifically the Mayor's Youth Council, the Grand Rapids Youth Master Plan, in which we had 25 youth that were actively engaged in that process, and then the LEAD employment program. So, Shannon, take it away.
Well, thank you, Lynn. I'm going to talk a little bit about our Mayor's Youth Council Youth Master Plan and our LEAD program just briefly, and if anyone has questions, they can ask those questions after. But like Lynn said, we wanted to ensure that young people were not only seen but heard here at City Hall. So through the Our Children, Our Future standards, we created the youth the Mayor's Youth Council back in 1999. And so we are actually concluding our 14th Mayor's Youth Council today. And so our youth council consists of 15 9th through 12th graders who are residents of Grand Rapids, and their mission is to learn more about city government and to be a voice to city officials on issues that affect teens. So they meet with the mayor once a month. They meet with their elected officials. We have a curriculum that helps guide the discussion at each one of the meetings. So one meeting they might talk about what is public policy, what are some examples of public policy, how it's written. Another meeting they might talk about voting in elections, the functions of the city commission. So those are the meetings with the mayor. They also do an annual youth forum called KidSpeak. And KidSpeak was created by Michigan's children out of our capital in Lansing. And there's KidSpeaks around the state, but what's unique about our KidSpeak here in Grand Rapids is that it's facilitated by the Mayor's Youth Council. So every year we have KidSpeak, and in fact we had a KidSpeak about 3 weeks ago here at City Hall, where young people that live in the city of Grand Rapids talked about what education meant to them. So from curriculum choices to what motivates them to succeed in school. We had young people give testimony on those subjects to a listening panel that we assembled, which consists of the mayor, city commissioners, county commissioners, elected officials, with the hopes of with the hopes of them taking what they've heard and using that in some of their policy decision making. We also have a youth master plan. Back in 2008, we received a technical assistance grant from the National League of Cities, as well as a grant from the Forum for Youth Investment to create a youth master plan. And before then, we hadn't had a youth master plan. So we wanted to ensure that young people from 0 to 21 had what they needed to be successful in college, work, and life, along learning, working, thriving, connecting, and leading areas. So we assembled an adult steering committee that consisted of various members of the community. We also had a youth commission, and the plan at the end had a lot of policy recommendations. The youth commission, as Lynn mentioned a little bit earlier, consisted of 25 middle and high school young people that we actually hired to ensure that they had input into the youth master plan. And we have a special guest with us. Her name is Cheyenne Dawe. She is a senior, graduating senior at one of the high schools here, and she's in the office now, and she's going to kind of briefly talk about her experiences on the Youth Commission, as well as what kept her engaged in all of the programs that we have here. So Cheyenne, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Like Ms. Shannon said, my name is Cheyenne Dawe. I was a member of the Grand Rapids Youth Commission back in 2008. what kept me engaged in this program in particular was the fact that we got to meet with so many different important people, community leaders within our community. Every day we came down to City Hall. It was nothing to be able to see Mayor George Hartwell in the hallway or see different community commissioners and that kind of thing. It also gave us an opportunity to give us an opinion within our community. It gave us various leadership opportunities and everything else. The program was just remarkable. I'm sorry, I'm at a loss for words. We also prepared a youth survey called the Grand Rapids Teen Profile. It assessed school safety, educational aspirations, volunteer within the community, communication, home life, and neighborhood. We sampled about 1,500 youth, and that's about it.
And so what kept you engaged in the Youth Commission, and which was a few years ago, but you're still here working for our community children. So what about the things that we've done to help you engage and increase and enhance your leadership abilities?
Well, with the Youth Commission, a lot of different programs branched off of that as well, and I've worked as an intern over the years with you guys, and actually I'm doing an internship right now on an archiving project that we're working on. But just being able to come to the office and being able to see so many different community leaders and have my voice heard in a setting that's so detrimental to my future is just remarkable.
And one of the programs Cheyenne was part of as well was called our LEAD program, which LEAD is an acronym that stands for Leadership and Employment, Achievement, and Direction. And so it's a civic engagement, leadership, and employment program that we created in 2010. And it's a unique program in that we train young people in how to write resumes and cover letters, how to interview, basically getting them prepared for the workforce. And so they train about, we give them training for about 80 hours, a little over 80 hours here at City Hall. And then after the training, they're eligible for a job at a business that's signed on to be part of the Mayor's 50 campaign. So the Mayor of Grand Rapids called businesses in Grand Rapids to step up to the plate to hire young people between the ages of 15 and 21. So this is another one of our programs that we're very excited about. We even got recognition from President Barack Obama a few weeks ago. We were on a conference call. There was Mayor Hartwell and 2 other mayors in the nation that talked about their youth employment programs, and he talked about our program that we have here. So that kind of concludes our presentation. We stayed under 8 minutes and around 33 seconds. So.
Well, let me first of all say a huge. I was going to give mad props to Cheyenne. I think I may be too old to give mad props, but I hope that makes sense. Cheyenne, great to hear your voice, and great to have your perspective as a youth talking about youth engagement. It's really exciting, and of course, thanks to Shannon and Lynn, it sounds like some incredible work is happening in Grand Rapids, and we're really glad that you were able to share this. So what I'm going to do now is allow questions to come in from the group, and I'm going to throw a couple of questions out as well. But we invite anyone who's on the line here with us to submit their questions. You just type it into the chat window on the kind of right side of the screen, and they can be for one particular panelist, or they can be for multiple panelists. And by the way, Cheyenne should make sure to put on her resume that she spoke on an international webinar about youth engagement. She's going to be a superstar, I know. So she already is. So thank you again
Thank you so much
for being part of it. You're welcome. No problem. I had a question about, I think this is specific for Grand Rapids, whether or not there were policies that were created or driven by the Youth Commission that have been implemented by local governments. This might also apply to Cambridge, Nancy. So the question is, have there been any policies created and driven by the Youth Commission that have been implemented by your local governments, and how is your master plan implemented? I think I heard reference, I know I heard reference to a master plan in Cambridge, I believe, and I think I also heard of one in Grand Rapids. So if either of you want to take that, it'd be great.
This is Lynn Heemster from Grand Rapids. There were a couple of major issues that did come up. There were policy issues with regards to the use of parks, and there was some discussion about that the city was going to sell a building on the parkland. Our youth gave voice to that issue, made their opinions heard about that, and it actually went in favor of preserving the park land specifically. So there have been occasions like that where items come up under City Commission and where young people have a say. Currently there's a firearm issue in terms of City Hall, and we have our Mayor's Youth Council actually surveying teens and giving testimony to how they feel and their opinion as to the use of firearms and in City Hall. And then finally, the Youth Master Plan, because of that survey of youth that was generated, we actually began the LEAD program as a result of the fact that it was the #1 issue that our young people said that they needed, which was meaningful employment. And so the mayor paid close attention to that, and he directed that be prioritized within the city's sustainability plan.
Great, thank you very much. I'm sorry if folks were hearing me type. I just realized I wasn't muted there. Nancy, did you have anything to share, and maybe Mark as well?
I could give you 3 quick examples. One, the MBTA, the Massachusetts Bay Transit Association, was last year we're going to raise their prices, and the Youth Involvement Subcommittee, half of the group worked on this particular issue, and they testified to the city and also to the state, and also lobbied legislators to try to reduce the hikes, especially for student passes. They've also in the past worked on trying to lower the voting age in municipal elections, and they've teamed up with other cities, and that's one of those issues that is stuck in legislation. And a more local example is, as I mentioned before, the Youth Involvement Subcommittee has been working with middle schools, and Cambridge just changed their structure. It used to be all K-8s, and now we have more of a middle school model. And when these changes were being debated quite intensely in the city of Cambridge, the school department came to the Youth Involvement Subcommittee to help get a forum together and focus groups of students to find out their perspective, especially for those that are in high school that had already experienced the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in Cambridge. So their voice was definitely heard, and they definitely had words of wisdom that helped guide the debate and the decisions that were then made. So they've been at local level, state level.
Great. Thank you, Nancy. Mark, anything you wanted to add from Portland on that?
Sure. So separate from Youth Pass, which is a pretty big policy that, saves parents about $3.5 million a year in transit passes for their children. The Youth Commission also was responsible for developing the Youth Planning Program, which is actually which is inside the city's Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, which is a program that hires youth planners to be a part of the infrastructure of the way the city actually does its business. Listening to Stanley and Susan, it resonated because this particular youth planning program does a tremendous amount of work in the community. It's all youth working with other youth in the community doing planning education and doing GIS mapping and surveying to ensure that the built environment and all that information that they gather around the built environment is provided to the planners, and they develop structures. So there's that. We had a committee a couple of years ago that ended. It was the Health and Wellness Committee. They did work in. They applied for some grant funding through a health organization. And we have school-based health centers that are inside schools that are fully run health centers, comprehensive health centers, and they were able to get a $50,000 grant to implement youth advisory boards or councils in each of the 8 schools that have a school-based health center in the high schools in Multnomah County, and get these youth advisory boards to work specifically with both the school and the school-based health center to ensure that young people are getting the services that are needed in these centers. What are the barriers? Changing the kind of focus area within the center to make it more youth-friendly, providing education and advocacy to the student bodies, and reach further out to the community. But I think the biggest thing currently is the Youth Against Violence work. They the Youth Against Violence Committee developed the first youth summit against violence in Multnomah County that was completely organized, driven, facilitated by young people for young people. And they had, the first year they did it, they had 200 young people come to develop policy recommendations in 7 forms of violence plus restorative justice. And then in the afternoon they had 50 elected officials and local leaders come to engage youth in listening to their stories and hearing the policy recommendations. So since then, policy bodies all throughout the county and the city have been implementing different policy recommendations, and they just hosted their 2nd annual youth summit in March where 400 young people came. So they're building this whole movement around youth driving the process. So those are just some policy areas that are making big impacts.
That's great. I want to redirect the conversation a little bit to a couple of different fronts, and one is to do with funding. Stanley and Susan, I'd be interested in this from your perspective as well. But a couple of folks have just asked about where you get funding to support the work, and specifically there was reference made to paying youth commissioners some stipend or kind of mini salary. So who funds each of the work? Mark, it sounds like you've got city and county support.
We have city, county, national. We have State Farm supporting us with grants. We've got the Penny Family Fund in the Bay Area that funds us. We've got city funding and county general fund. And we're always
Stanley
looking
Susan,
for more.
How does of course. Stanley and Susan, how does it work with you all? Does schools pay you, or are there grants, or how does it work?
Well, we really have several levels of how we ask for funding. If the land we're working on is going to appreciate and there's going to be some real estate income from it, we charge a full professional fee for our artists. If it's a school or a community center that can't afford it, then we charge either a very low honorarium or we do it for free.
And we have applied for and received grants from Real Estate Foundation, and our partnerships with some of the other organizations that are out there, like the Grandview Woodland Food Connection Group and with Evergreen Learning Grounds, sometimes provide some funding. I believe that a lot of this work is already funded in the sense that we have a public education system, all of us. And within the system, there's social studies teachers, there's science teachers, and sometimes the resources that they have in way of, I'm talking about in-kind support. For example, with our youth conferences, schools provided the site, students themselves provided the catering, so some of that implementation really is already funded by the schools. It's really redirecting what the teachers are already doing. So we've received funding from the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada to create lesson plans so that teachers can implement some of the techniques that we've developed. So the approach that we have been using is to use the resources that are already out there and make sure that they're deployed effectively.
Thank you very much. Nancy and or Lynn and Shannon, just the funding question.
This is Lynn. I would say this, that cities are on hard times, and I've had to raise grants in order to sustain the office and to sustain any programs that occur for young people. So we have young people doing their own fundraising as well as through various grant resources in order to make it happen. And we're a very small office. There's just Shannon and myself.
Gotcha. Nancy?
So the Cambridge Kids Council and the Youth Involvement Subcommittee is funded by the city. So so I obviously am part of that. And then there's a coordinator who is about a 15-hour-a-week position. And then the students, as I said before, they receive $10 an hour up to $700 a year. So we are very fortunate in Cambridge that they're able to fund this, and yes, very grateful. So that's
very good. Let me take us in an even more different direction, because we do have some folks, guys, on the line today who, are in charge of hosting public engagement activities for, let's say, a particular agency or a city and so on. And so what they're thinking about is not just the component of having a youth council or a youth commission, but of drawing youth into a broader public engagement process, like for a transportation system or for a master plan or for a park plan or something like that. And so one of our participants wanted to know more about techniques for engaging youth beyond having them serving on a commission or a board. And Stanley and Susan's presentation certainly, I think, sort of spoke to that. But maybe the folks from the cities want to share some ideas about how to sort of get youth participating in community decisions outside of the commission or youth council context, and also getting not just the well-to-do youth but underrepresented groups engaged in sort of a typical public engagement process that's not necessarily connected to a youth commission. So maybe the city folks want to take a stab at that, and then I can come back to Stanley and Susan. Anyone want to take that?
This is
sure. I mean, does anybody want to go first?
Go ahead.
No, you go, please.
Well, this is Lynn Heemstra from Grand Rapids, and I would say that it is important that outside of the city that's really looking for youth engagement, they have to have partnerships. They have to reach out to those who actually work with youth on a daily basis, and that in particular is critically important. Otherwise, if you have youth, like one or two youth that are sitting on a board or commission, it's not going to work very well, because the young people don't really have their peer group or their peer support for it to be very successful.
I can go if you'd like. I mean, I
Mark,
think
go ahead.
that. Oh, Mark.
No, Nancy, please go.
Okay. I would agree what Lynn had to say about partnerships and finding the people in the community that work with the young people, because that's how you make your connections. And I had mentioned at the beginning that so for instance in Cambridge there's a middle school network of out-of-school time folks, and that's been a great resource to tap into to try to find kids to work with, and to reach out to the adults that are working with the kids. And although Cambridge is a city, sometimes it feels like a small town. The coordinator that works with me also has another job, and one of the young people that participates in that program was, having a lot of problems, and then she was actually able to reach out to the police commissioner, who was able to talk to the school safety officer. So I think that making those connections and partnerships is key to try to find those kids that you were talking about, the ones that are not engaged.
I agree with everything I've heard. There's a couple things that we do on our end. So one is the Youth Commission and the Youth Planning Program developed a youth engagement manual. It's a manual that was written by young people for adults, just so it answers this exact question. So it's a manual that basically walks an adult or an adult organization who wants to engage with youth through the steps that they need to take to engage youth in an authentic way. So it first looks at empowerment. I mean, it really there's a structure of a ladder that it's a model that's used commonly. That's the ladder of empowerment, and how much do you empower young people to participate in equitable and comfortable ways. And so the higher you are in the ladder, the more opportunities you're going to get to engage young people. The Youth Commission does a lot of community engagement with youth, and one of the things that they do the most is they go to where the youth are instead of having the youth come to them. They provide food, they provide bus tickets and transit, they provide childcare. So any event that the Youth Commission puts on and tries to engage in the community, all of those things are automatically in place. We mostly work with youth of color and low-income communities, queer youth, Muslim youth. We do not work with the more affluent youth in Multnomah County and Portland. And so we are always going to engage and find the youth in the communities that don't have a voice historically. And so so if anybody's interested, I'll write my email address in the chat box, and you're more than welcome to email me to get a copy of the youth manual. I'm happy to send it via electronically for all those folks out there that want to utilize it.
Mark, you read my mind. There are a number of us chirping about that, and I know that they'll be emailing you, so you better set up a filter or something for the requests for that manual. We also, the folks from British Columbia, Stanley and Susan, also chimed in with a link to a youth manual that had been published there. And I wonder if it's the same one, folks, that I had first seen, that I think came out of the city of Toronto. There was a manual that I really found very interesting, called the City of Toronto Involve Youth 2, A Guide to Meaningful Youth Engagement. I'll post the link to that one as well, that I found particularly compelling. And Mark, there was also some interest in seeing the ladder of empowerment, which I assume might be in the manual as well, but if not, I know people would like to see that. So let me just quickly post the link that I had to the manual and guide that I was seeing. I think that Mark is posting some info in the box, but only the organizers and panelists can see it. So Mark, if you can post that info again, but just use the all entire audience option, or else we can repost it. I'll just post Mark's email address right now myself, and then that should get you most of what you need. Okay, well, let me come back to Stanley and Susan, because the original question was about, kind of compelling ways to get youth involved outside of that youth council or youth commission. And I guess one thing I was curious about is how does it work with your programs? Do you come into existing classrooms where a class is being held, or are you advertising an event for youth to attend separately, or what do you think is enticing youth to participate in your programs, particularly the ones where they get to do artwork themselves?
One of the ways that I do it, I work a lot in small communities, particularly in Main Street revitalization. But whenever I go into a community where I'm going to make some changes, I make a point of going into the local school to talk to the kids. because any changes that occur in the environment are going to raise their resentment towards the they, and so I want to get them involved. And their input is always welcome. I spend half a day with them. We can go from grade 3 up to grade 12, and I'd like Sue to talk about her program of mentorship.
Yes. When we do go into the schools, we often train the older students. So we would train maybe the 16-year-olds to work with grade 3s and 4s. And so in that way, there's a mentorship cascade, and we utilize this skill of leadership that the older kids have, and that's another way that we reach out. Sometimes the students find us, and many of the times community organizers find us. So Evergreen Learning Grounds would contact us and ask us to engage the youth. Quite often, the young people find our techniques really easy to use because it uses drawing, and we don't look at policy. Instead, we collect data so that the policy can be created. So as an analogy, we go around asking people what their tastes are and what colors would they like to see in their food, and what textures they like to eat, and then we give all that information to the chef. So in terms of how we find our youth, once again, through the networks of community organizers, through the schools themselves, and sometimes when the youth come up to us. So that's what's been happening in the past few years.
There's also city programs where they ask us to involve the youth. We had one recently for the Transportation Committee in Vancouver. We did a street workshop. We have some visuals. Show you one.
Yeah, if you can share my screen, then I can show the Viva Vancouver. Okay, so this is. Hello, was there a question? So
this is Cheyenne from Grand Rapids. I'm sorry, I was just giving a little bit of youth input. I was going to say that for me, it was more about resume-based. My mom had actually put me in the program with the Grand Rapids Youth Commission. I'm guessing she received something via email. And for me, it was just colleges look at that kind of thing. And I felt that it would put me in a better position for college and work and just my life overall.
Well, if you need a college recommendation, let me know. I'm just kidding.
Thank you.
That's certainly an important point to make, though, Cheyenne. I mean, I think we have to be candid about what's important to young people in terms of advancing themselves, and college degrees are important to a lot of folks, and oftentimes what admissions offices tell us they're looking for are those leadership experiences and ways of bettering yourself. So so that's really important. As Susan, I think you were trying to show us one other visual there.
Yes, I think you can see my screen here. So this is actually an event that was hosted by the City of Vancouver, and they asked us to do a co-design street party. So we had been training a number of youth to be artists. So the youth drew for other youth, and then the adults drew for adults. So this is one of our youth artists here, Tessica Trump. And we do also try to engage at-risk communities. So that's usually through a community organizer who might work with with at-risk youth. So recently it has been Ian Marcuse from the Grandview Woodland Food Connection Group, who's been building school gardens in inner city surroundings. And so we would go in and draw for these gardens. So I'm just going to show you one of these drawings that show a garden. So can everyone see this? So this is the co-design drawing. Can you guys see?
We can see. Yeah, it's a little hard to make it out, but go ahead.
So this drawing takes about an hour to draw, and it starts out with only one person. So maybe this guy here was the starting point, and I would ask them, okay, what are you doing? And then I would draw whatever they say. And there would maybe a group of 8 students around me, each contributing to the drawing. And sometimes they would go in and draw it themselves, but most of the time we would we would draw it precisely their direction. And you can see it's a very detailed drawing, and there may be 8 of these drawings, and they would be brought around to the community for voting purposes. And so we had youth artists help out to facilitate these drawings amongst their peer group, and then the group of them would go around to gather support around the drawing. So that's one way that we connect with the groups in a way that where we can communicate the ideas very clearly. Does that answer your question?
I think that does get to the question the person was asking. Yes, thank you very much for that. Guys, I have about 10 minutes remaining, so not a whole lot of time, and I'd like to try to, whoops, I think I've got a little bit of feedback. I don't know if someone can turn off the audio on their side. But I would like to ask each of you, if you could, just to briefly speak to sort of the connection between your youth engagement work and the decisions being made by, you know, what I'll call power elites or elected officials. And I mean, we've heard examples in Portland and Cambridge, and I think in Grand Rapids also, of ways in which elected officials seem to really be honoring the work that's being done by the youth councils there. And there was talk of the school board looking at the work of the being done in Canada. I just am curious, sort of how you build that commitment from elected officials, not just to support the work financially, potentially, but also to make sure that the participation and the engagement that these young people are doing is going to be meaningful. How do you make that case, and what are some of the lessons that you've learned along the way of how to convince elected officials and others in power to take this activity seriously? So anybody can chime in.
I'll chime in. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. So in Cambridge, the Youth Involvement Subcommittee is part of the Kids Council, which is chaired by the mayor, elected official, and then there's also a school board and city council representative on that council. And I think for us, the key is to make sure that the young people are prepared and that they have something to say, and not to set them up for failure. And also there's that fine balance between, in our case, of trying to, as Mark mentioned, empower the young people as much as possible, but also make sure that what they're doing aligns with what the what are priorities for the elected officials and the various city leaders. So that would be my advice. And I would have to say that it is a fine balance of trying to honor both groups and set the course.
Hi, this is Lynn Heemstra, and I would certainly support that, what's been said about preparation of the young people, as well as the fact that this is hard work and it's challenging work, because leaders in political positions, and certainly in City Hall, don't naturally think about young people. And I would also say that, for many cities, it's not even their core service, and therefore anything you do is really to help make the connection about how many children are living in the city and what difference they make. And therefore, we continually look to create opportunities where city commissioners and the mayor can interact with young people. And our Kids Speak event truly is an opportunity. All our state and local officials really enjoy it because they can take quotes from young people and integrate those quotes with the kinds of policies that they're working on. And that event is quite relevant to the discussions and the issues that are going on in the community.
Yeah, I want to add what Lynn had to say. It's a rough road. It is challenging work, and you know, we've been dealing with a tremendous amount of tension actually currently within the two budgets. So we have, you know, this intergovernmental agreement is an agreement between city electeds and county electeds, and when we first started the agreement, it was back in 2007, 2 mayors ago, and Mayor Tom Potter was a huge advocate for youth voice in government, and he understood community engagement, and he was probably one of the most historic mayors in Portland that really brought in the voices of the community, specifically communities of color and youth community, into the way in which he did business. And unfortunately, we are struggling. We're now on a 3rd mayor, and he does not have the same values. And it is very challenging. And I think one of the things that Nancy said too is that, you know, you got to find what are the issues you're working on, and if those issues happen to resonate with, you know, the issues in all of these different electeds' portfolios, then maybe you'll get some traction. The Youth Commission pushes very hard. They kind of act as a community body within government, and that is incredibly challenging for elected officials who want a certain agenda. So, you know, we do social justice work. We just happen to do social justice work inside government, and that's not acceptable. We have all the youth that we have on the front are youth of color, and all of our elected officials except for one are white, and most of the people that we work with live on the fringe, and most of the folks that are in government are privileged, you know, financially privileged heterosexuals, and we're pushing serious issues, and the constituency is a group of young people who don't want to acquiesce to the issues that the electeds want to, and so it's an incredibly challenging time, and it's been, you know, for years, but we do have the support financially, but when it comes down to it, there's a lot of resistance.
Well, on the one hand, I don't want to end on a candid note, but on the other hand, I am very glad that we could take a peek into the challenges associated with doing this work. And Stanley and Susan, it just occurred to me I hadn't given you a chance to respond to this, and I know you mentioned having school leaders engaged in some of the work that you were doing about within schools. Any thoughts on kind of enticing elected leaders and others to support what you're doing or to pay heed to it?
I think one of the easy entry of politicians into talking with our youth is that we focus on behavioral issues, and we focus on the future. So we don't talk about issues so much. We let the future take care of the issues, because the issues is mainly talking about the past. So we have 3 rules in our discussion. One is you speak for yourself. The second is that there's no negative criticism. You can only make positive remarks. That's reinforced by the fact that the artist can't draw negatives.
A negative, when you say, I don't want to see slot machines, that looks like a blank page. That looks like a white piece of paper. So we can't draw any negatives.
And the third is that we say we avoid solutions. We're just looking at possibilities. So this means that the politician or the decision maker can come into the discussion and say, well, I as a family person would like to take my kids down and do this. So it's an easy forum for them to enter into.
So I guess what we do is we create a situation where, yes? Go ahead.
I'm sorry, there's a delay here, but I was just saying that the 3 rules that you mentioned are very compelling, and I have to ask you to be very...
Your voice cut out.
I'm sorry, I just was saying the 3 rules are very compelling that you mentioned there, and also we're very short of time if you wanted to make one last comment.
If you want to have a look at the National Film Board film, which illustrates very well what we've been talking about, it's called Chairs for Lovers, available online, National Film Board.
We're going to type that into the chat window, I think. Susan is doing that now. It's great to have both Stanley and Susan. Stanley gives some of the comments, and Susan's able to to add them to the screen. So a great team the 2 of them make. Well, I'm afraid I need to leave it there. This has been such a stimulating discussion from, as I said, from coast to coast, Vancouver, Portland, Grand Rapids, and Cambridge, and I'm delighted to have had the chance to talk with Mark, Stanley, Susan, Nancy, Lynn, and Shannon. Their names and titles are on the screen. I encourage you all to be in touch with them further for additional resources, particularly Mark's the manual that Mark mentioned in Portland. But with just a quick reminder of our next webinar coming up 4 weeks from today, Tuesday, the 11th, I believe, June 11th at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, and our conference coming up September 22nd through 24th in Salt Lake City with the call for proposals online through the end of this month. But with that, thank you so much to our panelists, and thank you all for being with us. A great conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
So is it all over?
All right. We're still here. Thank you so much for your resource and for your comments. I feel like a lot of the discussion was around policy, and you provided some technique, and we were sharing about technique. So I'm going to be taking a look at your link there to see what techniques are out there for youth engagement.
Great, and I have our youth planning work wants to evolve, and so I really want to get in contact and connect with some of the work that we're doing down here with what's going on in Vancouver, because I think some of that stuff you're doing is amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good idea.
Yeah, I have a colleague who runs the youth planning program, Pam Fawn, and she's a planner and a youth organizer, and she's trying to right now develop a really comprehensive planning education curriculum that can be implemented in universities through the Portland State University's Urban Planning Department, and link community-based organizations and young people, so kind of expanding the work. And we've done activities like you, but not to the level that you do in terms of having young people draw their ideal communities and kind of what do they want to see in their neighborhoods. I would love to connect you guys, because those things that you're doing are just phenomenal. I mean, they're really, really awesome.
I don't think we mentioned that. The fact that we actually work with science teachers too. So instead of trying to like reinvent the wheel,